I was going to read, so I'm going to skip that. But before we get started, just a couple of announcements. You probably heard it a million times, but for those of you who haven't, if you could please silence your cell phones, don't turn them off because we encourage tweeting, and then you can text in your questions as well. If you want to text in Poll Everywhere, just text IST Startup with your question to 37607, or you could just raise your hand. That'd probably be quicker. And then, what else do we have here? We're going to be photographing and filming some of this, so if you guys aren't comfortable with that, if you'd be so kind as to move to the back and let me know at the end so I can, get you out of there.
Go to the back.
You want to go to the back? Okay, we can give the talk from up top. All right, because the bio is pretty much already read, I'm just going to hand it over and we're going to get started on this. So everyone, Mike McGlade.
Thank you. Does this work or does this? Which one should I use? Can you guys hear me? Yes, no, yes? All right, I'll skip this. All right. Cool. It's nice to meet everyone. My name's Mike McGlade. I graduated computer engineering in 2000. Was trying to start a business way back then as well. So interestingly enough, when he said shut down laptops, close the phones and all that stuff, I was the guy sitting in the back of the room, laptop open, doing a lot of work at that point in time. So it's amazing how things change over time. So I connected in with the folks here. They asked me to come in and speak about my experiences. Most importantly, I've done a lot of things over the last 10 years, one of which was right after business school. I started a web-based business that ultimately failed. It was in the social enterprise space. And what I found through that was that ego can really can play a dominant role as you start to build a business. So I told a story and wrote something for the Harvard Business Review a few years back that people seem to really like hearing. And so what I wanted to do is talk through my experience, lessons that I learned as a result of it. But I've got the attention span of a gnat, and I'm assuming you guys are probably, it's right before lunch. So I wanted to make this a little bit fun. So when I put together the presentation, it's 90 slides is the downside. The good side is it's one picture per slide, and I should go through it pretty quickly. Also, because I think we were going to cruise through this really fast, I put a video at the very beginning to sort of set the stage for that. So the agenda for today, I thought it'd be more entertaining to convey my story and the lessons learned via stepping through a bunch of slides. Zusa was the name of the business that ultimately failed, so I'll talk a little bit about my experience through that, what happened before and afterwards, and then leave tons of time for Q&A. But before we get started, I'd love to find out a little bit about you guys. So John was kind enough to share your profile a little bit this morning, but I'd love to kind of get a better feel for that. So can I get a couple shows of hands? So how many of you guys are actively, or let me step back. How many of you guys would like to be an entrepreneur at some point in time in the future? Okay, how many of you are actively working on a business now? One or two? Okay. And for the rest of you guys, how many of you want to get involved? This is a legal class, right? Want to get involved in some type of legal area? One, two, couple? Okay. All right. So, and then I guess lastly, how many want to go work for a startup either right out of school or within the first couple of years? Half a dozen or so. Okay, cool. So who am I? So I've got about 15 years of sales experience. I was computer engineering, although I don't remember a thing, sorry to admit this, about engineering. I used to kid around. I was a sales guy all the way from the beginning. I used to write up in working in teams. Myself and my lab partner, we still keep in touch, and we kid around about the fact I'd write up our reports like Mad Lib style, and regardless of the results at the end, it would work. So I ended up going into sales, not really surprising. It was telecom equipment sales. Did that for like 7 years. I was always dabbling in startup things on the side. Bought an airplane, started renting that out, tried to do a peer-to-peer car rental business, and really realized that I didn't have the network or the skills I needed to succeed. So I went to business school, got my MBA from Harvard, and then coming out, I've done a lot of things since. I tried to get Zeus off the ground. That ultimately failed. I helped a film finance hedge fund get started. I helped them raise their first $500,000 and get lined up to raise $30 million. They're now one of the most active investment funds in Los Angeles. I was VP of Sales and Marketing for a HR technology company. I helped them basically go from less than 10 employees to 80 plus and really start scaling a business. We raised, while I was there, like $8 million at an $80 million valuation, so I saw a company go like this. Ultimately, they had some strategic challenges. I left before all of that came to fruition. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. I went and joined a financial services company when they had 3 employees and helped take them to 20-something employees and grow their portfolio from like 4 million to 25 million. And then in the last year, I've been an advisor, mentor, and consultant to a lot of entrepreneurs in LA. So just to set the scene, actually another show of hands, how many people plan on staying in the greater Philadelphia area after school? Wow, okay. How many plan on going to New York? How many don't know? San Francisco? LA? All right. So for those of you who are interested in either starting a business or in going and joining a startup, so the major ecosystems, they're popping up everywhere, but you've basically got San Francisco and Boston were the 2 traditional ones. It's interesting what's happening as you see new technology start to come into play. It used to be a very hardware-driven world where to get your new business off the ground, you had to go out and raise $5–10 million, invest in a ton of infrastructure just to go test your idea. Now, as you guys are well aware, you can use Amazon Web Services, you can use tools that allow you to create and test your business very quickly. And so as a result, some of your more creative cities are starting to take off. And your creative cities are really your LAs, your New Yorks. Philadelphia is starting to get a little bit of a scene, but people will argue on both sides of the branding of the different startup communities. So you've got Silicon Valley, obviously. The nickname for LA, Silicon Beach. It's a nice area, Santa Monica, right by the beach. Good lifestyle on both sides. If you guys ever have any questions about different ecosystems and stuff, feel free to reach out. Oh, and by the way, my Twitter is @MikeMcGlade. If you guys ever have questions, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/in/Mike McGlade as well. I'm happy to be helpful to folks that are here even after you graduate. So anyway, I've done a lot of things, and so now before I jump into the presentation, I thought it'd be good to start with a video that I go back to quite a bit. It's 6 minutes long, and one thing you'll learn for those of you who do go the entrepreneurial route is there are good days and there are bad days. And when there are bad days, you really need to have things that you lean on. For me, there's certain videos that I go back to. If you guys are athletic, this also helps sometimes before you do your workout. So we'll take a couple minutes and just kind of set the stage.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Pain is temporary. It may last for a minute, or an hour, or a day, or even a year. But eventually, it will subside, and something else will take its place. If I quit, however, it will last forever.
The margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second.
You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. If you want something, go get it. Period.
Don't be afraid to fail. You can't always win, but don't be afraid of making decisions.
You have to believe that something different can happen. He who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right. That most of you say you want to be successful, but you don't want it bad. You just kind of want it. You don't want it badder than you want to party. You don't want it as much as you want to be cool. Most of you don't want success as much as you want to sleep.
not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us.
Dig deep down, ask yourselves, who do you want to be? Figuring out for yourselves what makes you happy, no matter how crazy it may sound to the people.
Make a choice, right? Just decide what it's going to be, who you're going to be, how you're going to do it. Just decide.
Why not? Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why can't I do that?
What did you say to the kid? It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit. And keep moving forward. How much you can take. And keep moving forward. Get up. Get up. And don't ever give up.
We can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time.
To be able at any moment to sacrifice what you are for what you will become. Most of you won't be successful because when you're studying and you get tired, you quit. I don't do well in math. You're right. You ain't never studied. I'm not good in writing because you have never written before. Talent you have naturally. Skill is only developed by hours and hours and hours of beating on your craft. If you are not making someone else's life better, then you're wasting your time. Don't cry to give up. Cry to keep going. Don't cry to quit. You already in pain. You already hurt. Get a reward from it.
Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not point the finger saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
Because every day is a new day. Every moment is a new moment. So now you got to go out and show them that I'm a different creature. Now.
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
The 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power. The power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure.
Now, what are you gonna do?
Because limits, like fears, are often just an illusion.
So that's a startup. If you guys have never worked at one or been through the experience, beginning to end, that's it. It's exciting. You feel like you're getting punched in the face sometimes. You've got up days, down days. That's it, totally wrapped together. And if you guys ever need to feel like what it's like, or you're struggling through something, like, I can't tell you how many times I've gone back and just watched that, you get remotivated again. So now I'm going to walk you through the story and say, like, beginning to end, for those of you who want to be an entrepreneur, for those of you who've thought about it, what's the experience like and what have I learned from it? So number one, entrepreneurship is fun, right? You look at it and you're like, well, I'm going to start and build something from scratch. It's a lot of good things. You get this really big idea and you get really excited. That's what I looked like when I came up with my last one. My friends tease me. When I first moved out to LA, I went through a phase where I started like highlighting my hair. They're like, was that you in like 2004? And thankfully, none of those pictures are out on the web, I don't think. But anyway, so you get really excited. You think sales are going to be really easy because everybody's going to want your product. And you're going to make millions of dollars. After all, what could go wrong? Do you have any experience? Well, not really. I was trying to start my first business while I was here at Penn State. Would have been a competitor to Monster and Hot Jobs back in 99, 2000. And ultimately, I realized I didn't have any experience and it was time to go get a job. But a lot of people decide they're going to dive in. And I actually tried to do the same thing after my MBA. Well, you don't have experience, but everyone's raising money. So you should be able to raise money too. So you jot down your big idea. You've got a couple meetings with friends. This is a law class, so I had to throw this one in there. Maybe you go out and you get a patent. You pitch your idea to investors, and they're going to invest. Sounds right, right? At least that's the plan. By the way, please let me know at the end of this how much I've dated myself with some of the slides when we go through. I'm hoping people at least remember Garfield, but there are some slides in here. I was running through the deck with my family earlier in the week. They're like, nobody's going to understand what that is. So I'll try and point stuff out. So you'll pitch it to investors. They'll invest. At least that's the plan. But it's hard to find them. This is one thing that I found from being here was I had an idea that has now since become Monster and Hot Jobs. And we had actually sold it to some clients. And I wanted to go out to raise money. I was literally, we didn't have Google at the time. I was looking up on what was of the web way back then, like how do I find angel investors? Who are popular venture capital firms? So I don't know if the school's improved in that regard in connecting people with investors, but one thing that John and I were talking about earlier this morning is like make sure you start connecting in with people who are well connected today. Even if you're not going to build a business for 5 or 10 years, it's good to build those relationships. So it's hard to find them. And when you do find them, they've got lots of questions. They're going to really dig into what you're doing. So progress turns out to be a lot slower than you think it was going to be. It's not really going according to plan. When you sat back and said, this is going to be great, we're going to get 100 customers signed up, or I hear a lot of people, I'm a mentor at one of the accelerators out in Los Angeles, and can't tell you how many people are going to build the next big app. When you step into how are you guys going to make money, they don't really have a plan other than everybody's going to want it. So me being a sales and marketing guy, make sure you really think through some of those stages because reality is definitely going to look a lot more like this and not so much just smooth sailing. Turns out it's really, really hard when you get into it, particularly when you're the only one or maybe you've got 1 or 2 co-founders that are going through it together. But regardless, you know you're going to sell a lot of it once you get started. You just know it. It's in your blood. And everyone's going to want it, and you're going to make millions. So you continue on. Who doesn't? Well, not, how many people have no idea what this is? How many people do know what this is? All right, good. So apparently there's a new version of Zelda. I was waiting for like the old school with like 16-bit, but you can't raise any money. For the investors that you do connect with, they've got lots of questions. They're going to, particularly these days, they're going to push you to really know what your strategy is. They're going to look for customer feedback. So what you're going to have to do is likely bootstrap and build a prototype. And even with that, I found with Zeus it was incredibly difficult to raise money. And I had a network, not nearly as strong as it is now, but I was able to meet with some investors. So ultimately, and the theme of the story that I wrote a couple years back was letting your ego get involved. So at some point, you may push back and say, you know what, I don't need them. I can go do this on my own. You're going to bootstrap, right? You're going to use your own money to put it together because bootstrapping's cool, and everyone's doing it. This is one of the things that I found incredibly challenging as you go and start to build a business is surrounding yourself with other people who are successful. There's a fine line between looking at what they've been able to do with their businesses and what you're looking at. Just because all of your friends around you are starting to see progress, starting to raise money and keep going, that doesn't necessarily mean that whatever you're building it is the right thing to dive into that particular time. So be aware of the fact that the folks who are around you may not reflect on whatever your particular idea or concept is. So you decide you'll find ways to get by. Turns out the reason why you're having a hard time raising money and putting your team together is maybe your strategy isn't exactly as sound as it could be. You're not really sure which way to turn, and your customer model really hasn't been figured out yet. So there was a saying that I read a couple months back saying one of the challenges with entrepreneurship is not knowing which direction makes forward progress. And I can't say that enough. It's when you're trying to build a team and trying to build a new product or service, it's incredibly difficult to know which way is forward. You want to test a lot of things. You want to work with a lot of different potential investors. You want to work with different clients. You want to work with different teammates. But you don't necessarily know which solution is going to be the right one. And so you'll make a little progress in a lot of different areas. And it's really difficult to know which way you're moving and to make sure you're moving forward. If you are working with a co-founding team, this is inevitable. This is going to start to happen. I mentioned the HR technology company that raised money at a $100 million valuation. I left in January of 2012, and they went under in June, I think, of 2012. It's not talked about very much, but there were some challenges internally with that. So eventually he said, you know what, forget it. I'm going to go build what I want to build. Steve Jobs did it with the iPhone. He didn't take much feedback. He just knew what they wanted. I'm going to go do it. So you build what they'll want. How many people don't know what that is? Everybody knows? Oh, good. I was worried about that one. If you build it, they will, well, you filled dreams. Okay, good. Turns out it's really hard. So in that video where Rocky just gets crushed, you go through that multiple times in a given day, and that's when you've got a really solid business. There's going to be something that's just going to slug you in the face, and you're not going to know where it's coming from. It could be you're trying to raise money and an investor asks a question that you just weren't expecting. It could be, I've had this happen a couple times, where you've got a profitable business. FastPay, that I was most recently at, is a profitable business. They're growing. You start recruiting your team. You think you've got one area set, and you move on to another, and an employee will come in and say, hey, I just got pulled away by this other startup that's growing really fast. It just punches you in the face, because now you think you've got one area totally taken care of, and you've got to go back and revisit it. So this happens on a day-to-day basis. Make sure if you're going to go into it, or if you're going to go join a startup, that you're willing to go through that. I talked to another friend of mine who was with us at BetterWorks. After I left, the way they described the way they let everybody go was things were going really, really well during the week, and one day they just brought everybody in and said, today's your last day. Here's your last paycheck. I think they had 40-something people at that point in time, and they were all fired. This is how they felt that afternoon. He then went on to 2 other startups, and I caught up with one of the other ones that he was at, and he said it was literally the exact same experience all over again. They were growing. They had their Series A done. They were lining up their Series B, and from out of nowhere, the venture firm decided that they were going to pull the investment in the Series B that was supposed to hit later that week. They ran out of money. They were literally celebrating on Monday a new feature release that they had been working on for a year, and on Thursday, they were let go, the entire company. So this happens on a regular basis. Be prepared for it. It's really expensive, too. So if you're bootstrapping, you're probably living off whatever savings you have, or you're borrowing from parents. You're just doing whatever you can do to get by. It gets really expensive, and it takes a long, long time. But you step back and you're like, you know what? I can do this. I'm an entrepreneur. You watch a couple more of those videos. You start getting really excited. And entrepreneurs are really cool. So you start wrapping your personality around this, and you start getting excited about what you're going to do. You're making friends with lots of investors. You're talking about your idea. They're expressing interest. Most people won't take the energy to sit back and say, you know what, I think that's a terrible idea, or I think here are the challenges you're going to face. Why don't you focus your energy elsewhere? They'll say, hey, this is interesting. Get some more feedback and come back to me. So you're sure they're going to invest after you launch. They'll just say, oh, get to that next milestone and come talk to me. That'll be something that's interesting. But now you've launched, right? Like, let's say you're building an app. Let's say you're building whatever the business is, and no one's coming. Can't tell you how many times I've had friends build something. I mean, these are really smart people. They'll go out, they'll raise $500,000, a couple $1 million, and I'll look at their corporate strategy, and it doesn't seem to make sense. But they were able to convince somebody that it made sense, so at least they're not working for free. They put this thing together, but they don't really have a good go-to-market strategy. They open, and this happens. And they'll say, like, we've got capacity for we're capping it, 1,000 customers, that's it. And I'll check in 2 months after they've launched, and they have like 50. So it happens a lot. Turns out that's mostly because your product is more like a vitamin and not like an aspirin. So I'm sure all the entrepreneurial classes will talk about, like, where do you fall within the customer's buying decisions, whether that's a business or that's a consumer. Is it something that's solving a pain? They go to bed and this is just like something they think about all the time, or is this something that'll just make them a little bit stronger, faster, better, whatever? Two very different sales cycles as you go through it. Also, if you're selling into businesses with whatever your business is going to be, it turns out it takes a long time to sell. And actually, this stuff is really important for those of you who don't want to be an entrepreneur and you're going to go join the corporate world. It's really important to know how all of this stuff works at the corporate level as well. So after I graduated, I took a sales job at a telecommunications equipment company back in 2000. They had, I think, like 2,500 or 3,000 employees when I started. And everybody was talking about how telecom is on this huge roadmap. The internet's going to be huge. And they were powering the infrastructure on the inside of it. So we did a lot of acquisitions over time and grew the company. I was there for 7 years. So at one point we went from 2,500 employees up to 10,000 employees. And then in 2001, 2002, stock market obviously had already burst at that point, and the market was really contracting. Turns out they ended up scaling all the way back to 2,000 employees. And just like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, a private equity firm bought them for like pennies on the dollar. So even at big companies, these things happen. And so if you start educating yourself through the process as to how does it work to get a business off the ground, when you're selecting which company are you going to go to after Penn State, you can look at the business and say, like, who are they selling to? What's the market look like? And is this a company that's going to be around for a long time? So in either case, it'll take forever to sell. And as you're building your business, you'll think, maybe it's time I should throw in the towel. I've at least found one thing that's happened in the last couple weeks from a picture. But then you step back. So you've been building your entrepreneurial business. You're like, wow, this is tough. I'm talking to investors. They're giving me tough feedback. But maybe they'll invest. We've launched. Maybe this isn't going the way I wanted to. And you step back and you're like, well, I'm not supposed to give up. What did Rocky even say in the video, right? Like, how many hits can you take and just keep going? This is where I see a lot of people derail. Is they look at this and they'll say, it's not supposed to be easy. I have to keep persevering in the face of all of these obstacles. And so knowing the difference between this is something that I'm not going to be able to get investment for, okay, fine, but my customers aren't interested in this and I can't recruit a team. At some point you need to decide, is this a business that's just really hard, which is the startup pushing a rock up the hill, or is this something that seemed like a good idea, you tested it, and it's just not going to work? So only through experience you start to learn that stuff. But I always say if you can't get a single customer to buy something, or you can't get a dozen of them to buy something, or sign something saying like, yes, I'm very interested in this, when you launch, I will absolutely sign up, then you're starting to run into some problems. This is another thing that I think entrepreneurs run into quite a bit, is that your personal brand gets associated with whatever the business is. So the business that I was launching after Harvard was called Zusa. I can't tell you how many times I'd go up to some friends that I hadn't seen a couple weeks, couple months, whatever, and the first question would be, hey, how's Zusa going? What's going on? How are you doing? Right? So like at some point, your business becomes you. And learning to separate those two is incredibly difficult. For the entrepreneurs who are in the room, I guess there's only a few who are working on something right now. At some point in time, like this will happen. Just make sure that you know how to separate the two. And I can't tell you how important of a lesson it is to learn this early in your career. You will waste much less time as you get older. So you start thinking maybe it's time, but you can't kill it. This thing's your baby. You've been slaving over this business for days or weeks or months, years. But it's starting to get lonely. So as you're starting to work on the business, even if you've got a co-founder, you're not in a corporate environment. You're not in the traditional schedule. You go out and catch up with friends. They've all got their business careers that are getting started. Or if you're working on a business while you're at Penn State, folks are going out to happy hours and stuff on the evenings and the weekends, and you're working on your business. This is going to happen even in a successful business. So just make sure you're prepared for it. And eventually you start running out of money. Your ego's bruised, and you don't want to talk about it. So when I talk about the lessons learned at the end of this, I'll talk about how it's incredibly important to have a support system around you. Make sure you're comfortable. You force yourself to talk about things that are uncomfortable. You don't want to let anyone down, and you don't want to let yourself down. So this is like you can see the spiral down into this is really hard. Do I shut this down? I don't know if I can kill this business. I don't want to let my family and friends down. I don't want to let myself down. That's all ego, right? It's really hard the first time to let go of that and to say, you know what, this didn't work, but you have to do it because the clock will just keep on ticking. And finally, if the business is not going to work, finally you'll throw it in and give in. Time to go get a job, repair your life. The nice thing, once you do make that decision, you start moving back, is that you'll find your friends are still there. And even though you thought the world was going to end, turns out it didn't. Right? So that was sort of the experience that I went through with the business that I tried to start out of business school. I learned a couple lessons as a result of it. So most importantly, work with and learn from experienced entrepreneurs. I can't say enough how important that is. If you are working on a business right now and you're starting to get good traction, surround yourself with a good team. If you are thinking of trying to start a business, I highly recommend going and finding a good team to work with. I think just going through the process with them on somebody else's dime is incredibly important. You will learn so much. The HR technology company that I went to and helped them build, they had 3 of the most well-known entrepreneurs and investors in LA. He was one of LA's most active angel investors. He had done 40 deals in the prior year. It was the founder of Farmville, and he was the guy who sold it to Zynga. He obviously made a ton of money with that, left a lot on the table when he left Zynga to go start the company. But he's obviously been through it. And the third co-founder was very early at PayPal. I think it was like employee 30. He was a co-founder of Genie and Yammer. So those 3 entrepreneurs coming together to build a business, and I came in as employee 10, was really incredibly powerful. I can't tell you how much you can learn in that situation, and it will really accelerate whatever it is you go to do, regardless of whether you're starting a business or you're going to go work with other entrepreneurs. The other thing that's important with this one is make sure you do your diligence on any business or any entrepreneur you go to work with. There's a lot of people who, to be a successful entrepreneur, you live in a reality distortion. You've got some kind of reality distortion field, right? Like they have to just believe with all of their heart and passion that they are going to be successful for them to be able to recruit people against the odds. Like logically, it does not make sense to go work in an entrepreneurial environment. The odds are stacked against you. And so you have to be able to sell. So there are A-plus entrepreneurs who can sell, and then there's everybody else. So what I don't recommend doing is going to find somebody who is really good at telling the story, but you know you're just not going to learn that much from them. Hey, if they can pay you, great. Just know that there's a high likelihood that at some point down the road, you're going to be ushered into the room with 20 other people, and they're going to say, we ran out of money. But if you are learning through that process, great. But really look at that entrepreneur that you're working with and find out if you're going to learn from them. Surround yourself with mentors. So I can't tell you how incredibly important this is. I'll talk about it at the end what I'm up to now, but I'm going out to raise capital for a new business right now that's going to amount to a next generation credit union. And I'm going through, and one of the first things I'm doing is talking to a lot of mentors, folks who have been through it from beginning to end and have sold their business successfully. And they'll be able to tell you, here are the firms that I've worked with, here are the customers I think you should talk to, here are the investors that have an appetite for whatever it is you're looking for. It will really accelerate the development of whatever you're doing. Or they can also accelerate the, hey, this isn't going to work and here's some of the challenges. They can at least help you ask the right questions and you'll ultimately get to the right answers. Obviously, I'm a sales guy, so I have to put a pitch in for selling. But if you're thinking of going the entrepreneurial route, learn how to sell. It is incredibly important. You have to be able to tell a story. You have to be able to recruit your team. You have to be able to sell investors. You have to be able to sell everybody, right? So learn how to sell. It's incredibly important. So the next time you have your big idea and you jot it down, make sure you develop a strategy as well. So where do you sit in the marketplace, right? Like who else is already selling a complementary product or service or technology or software app or whatever it is you're looking to build? Make sure you know where you fit. Are you the lower cost option? Are you the premium option? Are you the first mover that's coming in? Nobody's ever done this before, and you just know you're going to be able to capture a lot of market share as a result. If you're a first mover, make sure you're building in a big enough buffer from other folks who are going to follow you, because the fast followers are also in a good spot. So you may look at an opportunity, and by being here at Penn State, you're likely to see technology and see some trends before a lot of companies are. And so you may be able to capitalize on things where you can stand on the shoulders of other businesses that have already proven a market, and you can just move that much faster. Facebook to MySpace, great example, right? So they looked at MySpace and Friendster and all of these social networking businesses that had been around for a couple of years. They said, hey, why don't we try a slightly different business and test a different distribution channel by going through the universities and really keeping that as a closed network for some period of time, and then eventually open it up. So I think there's a lot of value in being a second mover as well, but you have to know which one you are. You're the first one that's out of the gate, or you're the second one, and if you're standing on their shoulders and taking their lessons, make sure that you're building a barrier to entry, because no matter what you end up doing, at some point in time, other folks are going to look at you and say, wow, that's really smart. Let's go and do the exact same thing. So make sure when they do that, and these are folks that have a lot more resources than you will, make sure that you can build some type of sustainable competitive advantage. So it's a law firm, so it's a law class, I have to throw another law pitch in. But I will say that this is incredibly important as well. So as I go out to raise capital for this new business, I interviewed about a half dozen different firms in LA, took recommendations from some friends of mine who are entrepreneurs who have raised money and sold their businesses, as well as just folks that I know who are on the investor side. And so I think it's really important to surround yourself with good investors and advisors. But if you find a good law firm, number one, they can make introductions for you. So if the law firm, I'm going to be working with Cooley, they do a lot of the funding for the venture firms on Sand Hill Road in SF. So what they can do is say, hey, I know that this firm has an interest in this particular type of business that you're looking to build. Let me introduce you to some of their partners. You may have, well, I've got some of those relationships already, but sometimes I don't know what the investment appetite is from different folks. And so for you guys, while you're here, start to find out who the connectors are in whatever market you're going to be going into after this. And also pay attention to who's coming through campus as well, speaking, even if it's not necessarily in your direct area. Find out who they are. And if you guys aren't on LinkedIn, make sure you get on LinkedIn and just connect with people and see how they can be helpful. Because not only can they make introductions, but they can help you avoid pitfalls. Does anybody not remember that? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. Pitfall, Atari game from way back when. So they can help you avoid pitfalls, right? So for me, I'm now going to be starting this credit union business. As I look at the market, there are certain missteps that I might be inclined to take, and they can sort of steer you away from them. And then also, if you're working with a great law firm, they will likely defer payment until after you've already raised capital, and that can be a really good indicator for somebody believes in whatever it is you're doing. So once you've done all of those things and you feel like you've got a good strategy, you've gotten some advice from your mentors and your teams, go out and recruit a team. So this is one of the things that John was telling me about this morning is you guys do a lot of teamwork in here. So there's two ways you can go about doing this as you're starting your business or you're looking to join a team. There's the type of opportunity where there's a lot of co-founders, and there's a type of opportunity where you're the solo entrepreneur. I've done the co-founder thing a couple times. It didn't really work out for me, but I've got a personality where when I want to head in a direction, I kind of want to head in that direction, so I'm sort of going more the dictator route. But I still think it's really good to have a good team around you. So what I am doing is making sure that I recruit folks that I believe in. They may not be joining prior to funding, but I'm lining up my team for after I've raised the money. I'll pull them on. I'll de-risk it for them as much as possible, but I'm the decision maker. And so for some businesses, if you do have co-founders, 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever it is, make sure there is one clear decision maker because you can waste a ton of time arguing and discussing the feedback you're getting from the market when speed is your most important advantage. How many of you guys have read this book or heard of this book? Okay, so for anybody who is thinking of going into entrepreneurship, this book is like gold. So what Eric Ries did is he started a business, I don't know, call it 10 years ago, and spent a lot of time and energy and money trying to get this thing off the ground. Eventually, he pivoted into another space, and what he realized was 80% of the stuff that he had just spent time and money building was totally worthless. Nobody cared. And what he realized was you can do really small experiments to find out what do your customers actually want, and then just go build that. So this book really steps you through piece by piece how to think about building a minimum viable product and testing that. You don't need to go out and build the entire business to figure this out. So as I look to build this new financial services company, I may not even have like a web-based application. I may just be paper, pencil, phone call, set it up and go in and talk to employees. Because through that, I can measure certain statistics to find out how many people want to sign up for this? How many people who do sign up for this want to go get a loan or want to get access to their credit score? And you can look at all of that data and then project it out and say, okay, if we make this easier for them and build a big tool around it, will that increase adoption rate or decrease it? How much money do I think I can make off of each company? How long did it take me to sell the company? Would it take me more time or less time if I had the following XYZ products and features built? Don't go build everything first. Have those conversations on the front end. And I think this is probably one of the most important books in the world of entrepreneurship today. It's taught at a lot of the MBA programs. And then Eric Ries, also, he works closely with Steve Blank, was his mentor, and there's like the Startup Owner's Manual and a couple of things that Steve's done. So I'd also look into some of that stuff. And then lastly, don't be stubborn. Make sure you listen to feedback. It's incredibly easy to become stubborn and say, I know what's best, I'm going to move on. But make sure you listen to feedback. Test your product market fit, or test your product or service until you find the fit that'll scale. Don't be afraid to change your mind. If it doesn't work out, you can always go back to what you were looking to do. It's never too late to start. So I always thought that if I was going to build something, I'd have to start in my early 20s and really get this thing going. Turns out a lot of successful businesses started in their mid-30s or 40s and so forth. So if you want to go the corporate route for a little while and then go into this, perfectly fine. Just make sure you always follow your dreams and be smart about it. So I already talked through some of this stuff. So ZUSA, plan was to build a platform for skills-based volunteering and corporate social responsibility. I'm a big believer in giving back to the community if you can. The pitch was you'd have Facebook for your personal social network, LinkedIn for your professional social network, and we were going to be sort of your third place. Turns out nobody really cared. Individuals really, like at the end of the day when you're done working, you're tired. You want to maybe just go paint a fence if you're going to volunteer. You don't necessarily want to take your skill and go keep working. And companies, they like talking about their corporate social responsibility reports and all that stuff, but nobody actually wants to pay for distribution. So couldn't find a business model that was going to work, and eventually we shut down the business. So keep moving forward. In the time since, I joined a VC-backed startup. This one was right after ZUSA. Literally day one, I remember calling my girlfriend at the time and saying, like, I can't figure out why anybody would ever buy this product. I went in with 3 pages of questions, and they literally didn't have a single answer. So needless to say, that company did not stay around very long. They had spent $20 million already of venture-backed money trying to build their business, and it got rolled back into the main entity. I then helped a small social enterprise-focused consulting firm. They work with celebrity foundations like Demi and Ashton Kutcher for the sexual slavery type thing, and Madonna's foundation, things like that. It was really neat. I really enjoyed working with them, but they didn't have a sustainable pricing model or competitive advantage in their space. So it's like, all right, that's not going to work. Mentioned the film production company, helped turn them into a hedge fund. That was great. Was working with one of my best friends from high school, and so you really see what it's like working hand in hand with somebody. I helped get them launched, and they're doing a lot of good things now. I already talked about the HR technology company. It was Perks Business. Their corporate strategy wasn't sound, even through all of this success, and based on the investors, the co-founders' profiles, and they ultimately failed. Nice enough, though, that the one corporate strategy that we were talking about did end up working, and so there is now a spin-off of that that's doing really, really well. I went to FastPay. So after building the team there, I helped them really figure out how to grow and scale, even with the strategy that had some challenges. I wanted to go do it again and prove to myself and to others that could be done. And I did that. And after doing that, I've now spent the last year working with a lot of entrepreneurs doing the same thing, repeating the process, helping them scale their business while looking for a new business to build, which I finally just found. So that's it. I think we've got, 5 minutes, 10 minutes for questions?
Sure.
5 minutes?
Thank Mr. McGlade. Come on, fire away.
Yeah. Any questions? Time for lunch? Okay. Cool. John, do you have a question?
So you left the classroom here, not so much inspired to become an entrepreneur, but maybe I'll be in the corporate world, and yet you found your way to this, and I know you've told us some of that you had the entrepreneurial spirit somewhere there, but you knew you had to get experience, which you kept bringing up here, and surrounding yourself with great mentors. How did you get all that together? I know you've told us the story, but what's the secret there?
So I think for me, I've known since I was a kid I wanted to start and run a business. My family will tell stories about how I abused my poor brother and sister and invented games that worked well for me, like a lemonade stand, and I'd fan them out around the neighborhood, and I'd take the profit margin and give them like 5 cents per cup. It's just in your blood if you're going to go start something. And so for me, it was about always looking for good opportunities. What I wasn't good at is knowing what's the best thing to invest my time in. And so that's just something you learn over time. And so what I would encourage everybody here is definitely follow your dreams and work on stuff. And if you want to start a business, start working on it. But try and find good people that can help you along the way. And that's what I've done. I mean, who knows if the new business is going to be successful or not? I think it will be. But even if it's not, you minimize risk as much as possible. And you can do that by surrounding yourself with good people or nights and weekending a business while you're working full-time, things like that.
So I think you've given us a pretty good sense that there's going to be some failure, and that lots of great entrepreneurs in America today and over the long history have had some failures, and they've learned from those. And the movie was great because picking yourself up, I can see you're from Philly, and I can see you standing on the museum steps feeling strong, just like Rocky Balboa did. But what is that thing about I'm not giving up? How do we dig down and find that?
So it depends on what you're not giving up for. It could be I'm not giving up on the dream of being an entrepreneur, or I'm not giving up on my coworker, I'm not giving up on my employees, or I'm not giving up on my investors, or I'm not giving up on this particular business. So it really needs to be applied to whatever the thing is at that particular point in time. For me, I can say that looking at the consulting business as an example. So there were a couple times over the course of the last year where I wanted to put the consulting business aside and really just dive into trying to get one of the new businesses off the ground, but I had a couple employees working for me, and so you don't want to give up on them. And so you find ways for whoever it is that you're working with to make sure that you're successful in whatever that is important to you.
Another thing I found you saying is that I spent this time in the corporate world. A classic entrepreneurship story is I spent this time in the corporate world. I learned a lot, but I was never in charge of stuff, and now I can't wait to break away and run my own life and my own business. Is that a big part of spending time in the corporate world?
It depends. I think the corporate world is great for getting deep and learning a particular industry and getting some experience around if you can work your way into a management role, because management is incredibly difficult when you make the shift from just like I'm an individual contributor, or I'm building whatever it is, or I'm coding my app, or whatever it is, and moving into management. So if you can get that experience on somebody else's dime, great. But I'd say breaking away, there's a certain amount of independence. That's nice. It's just incredibly difficult. But I enjoy it. So it's one of those things where I'd rather be in the fight than not.
So, Mike, very interesting presentation. For a lot of us here, being an entrepreneur could be, I want to be my own boss.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have this cool idea, I want to build my own business. These are two different things
Mm-hmm.
in terms of goals. Or it could be, I want to make my first million.
Yep.
So if I put these three things to you and ask you, which of these would be the right thing to go after, what would you say?
It depends on the person. So his question was, do you want to be an entrepreneur to make your first million? Do you want to be an entrepreneur to be your own boss, or do you want to be an entrepreneur? What was the second one?
Because I have this cool idea.
Cool idea that you want to just see it built. You want to build something. Right. And so what's the right answer, or what's the answer for me? So for me, it's a little of everything. I don't do well as an employee, so I think that for me, part of it's the independence. The reason why I've gone through so many of these in the last couple of years is I like getting companies to a certain stage, and then if I disagree with the strategy of the business, I'm not shy of saying I disagree with the direction you're going, so I think I'm out. I make sure I get them into a good spot, and then I'll transition. But for me, I think independence is probably number one. I'd say making money is certainly important. I don't think you allow yourself to get beaten into a pulp day in and day out, even when things are going well, if you don't have something you're chasing after. And I think for me, it's probably independence and then the carrot. Although I will say that, and I've said this to many entrepreneurs, it can't be about the money, because the odds of success, regardless of who you are, it's more the journey. And for me, I don't think I can do anything else. So it's probably independence for me.
Thank you.
You mentioned there's barriers to entry.
Yeah.
You want to kind of establish. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so the question's how do you create barriers to entry when you're small and starting out? It depends on what the business is. So what I'd say for, do you have a particular industry that, just in general? So big companies tend to move really slow. So you can out-execute them and get in. With one thing that you can likely do is, if you're a business-to-business company, you can get companies to sign contracts to say, like, all right, we're going to work with you for the next 1 year or 2 years or whatever it is. You can start to have them invest heavily in your platform. So Facebook is a great example, right? All of your pictures are on Facebook. All of your friends are on Facebook. The odds of you shutting it down and joining the next new thing is slim, although obviously Instagram and all those have proven that's the case, and that's why Facebook's buying them all. But like that's a good example, right? Like how invested, Snapfish, probably a better example, right? Like you've got all your stuff, all of your personal photos there. Are you going to shut it all down and rebuild everything on another one? So how do you make it sticky so that even if another company pops up that's better, it's just going to be such a pain for your customers to switch over, or contractually they can't, is basically what you have to do. And then I saw another question down here somewhere. Yeah?
Yeah, what stage of the development process would you start prototyping? I know the old way was to do prototyping a little bit later on, so get your business plan down,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. What do you recommend for that in today's market?
Yeah, so the question's like, when should you start prototyping? I'll answer versus like a business plan, all that stuff. I can tell you that I haven't done a business plan in like 10 years for any of these businesses. So my business plan is talking to customers. And that's all what the book talks about. It's basically go out and find out what will sell. Because I can tell you, you could sit down and think that you're going to create and capture this market and that market, and you might find out that you can't even get the customers on the phone because they're busy or you don't know how to reach them and things like that. So I'd say prototyping, even if it's just like a wireframe, like, hey, this is how it's going to work. Do you like this? That's day zero.
You know, it's real unfortunate that the engravers didn't finish the lion statue in time, but instead, everybody here wants you to have a copy of the textbook that they've been using, so please accept this with all our very great thanks.
Thank you.
There's some stickers for your passport.
Talks, you can enter to win a prize, so be sure to do that. And yeah, one more time for Mike McGlade, everybody.
Mike is willing to talk to you. Look, he's tough, and he's got a beamer.
So if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. And you want to get connected with people, feel free to reach out. Happy to be helpful. I wish I had more of those resources when I was here, so I'm glad to see that those are coming together now.